Hello and welcome to Building Futures Career Conversations. Conversations about careers with leading lights across the built environment. Today I have Kate Paterson, architect and workplace design lead for Ridge and Partners, who's with me here today to talk about her career. So hello Kate, welcome to Building Futures Career Conversations. Thank you for coming to see us today. So can you tell us a little bit about your career so far? What do you do, who do you work for, etc.?
Sure. I'm an architect by profession. I work for a large UK-based construction consultancy called Ridge, but probably the largest construction consultancy that nobody's ever heard of in the UK. My role there is to lead their workplace design team. And I'm currently based in the Manchester office, but my role is very much looking after clients nationally.
So when you were growing up, what made you choose architecture?
I had a really clear idea that I wanted to be an architect, or an architect, as I spelled it at the time, from about 13. And it was getting a career that I was quite artistic as a child, loved houses and spaces, but was firmly told by my mother there was no money to be had in art, but also was quite academic. So architecture, it just suddenly, it's like, oh, well, it does all of the things I like doing. So I was really quite lucky in a way because I had a vocation from quite young. It wasn't and that then informed what I studied at school and then where I went to university and so on. That was really helpful to have that clear vision in mind.
Because what we want as an industry, isn't it, is we want more people to choose the built environment, whichever role you do as an industry. And then we want more people to make that choice. So it's great to hear that you were encouraged to do architecture and to study it. And how has your career panned out since then? So obviously you went to university, you chose architecture. What has informed the choices you've made about where you've worked and how you've got to where you are now?
Sure. One of the key changes or the key points in my career for me was that I was promoted very quickly. And I got to a point where I realised that what I was doing a lot of management. I was doing financial stuff, I was managing people, I had a marketing role, and I kept inventing things. And my husband, who's a management consultant, would say, oh yes, but that's such and such. Does it already exist? I thought I just invented that. And so I realised that I was doing more and more management and less architecture. No training in management. So during one of the recessions in the late noughties, I went back to university and I took a master's in business, which has been such a useful thing back in my career in architecture. And I had the opportunity to go and live in Switzerland for a little while and study there. And so that was a real key point in my career and my development, where I think that we're all taught at our universities in how to be an engineer or an architect or a planning consultant, but nobody actually tells you how to do the stuff that most of us spend our days doing. So that was what the MBA really helped me with there.
And would you say that's kind of, because people are always fascinated by very successful people and they're always asking what is it that's made them successful. For you, has it been continuous learning? Because you were just talking about your MBA there. Do you think that's what it's been that's helped you to be so successful, that you've always been open to continuous learning? Or do you think there's other things, other sort of wisdoms that you'd share as to why your career's been as successful as it has been?
I think for me, I'm quite a generalist. I have a specialism in workplace design, and that very much stemmed from some work I did as part of my MBA. But I also have an interest in a lot of different stuff, and there's always new thinking and things that you can read about and so on. My early mornings are spent reading difficult books. You know, when I'm wide awake first thing in the morning, to read factual, management books and so on. That's sad, but actually one of my things. So yeah, absolutely open to learning, but also a sort of drive to keep going. And I feel it's very important as a woman in construction to keep going, because so many of us fall by the wayside. We go and we do something more sensible, maybe a little bit more easier, or we just step back from the sometimes challenging world that construction is. And so that is one of my things that is like, no, I'm going to keep going. I'm going to stay here and keep seeing what I can do. What can I do next? And so on. So I'd say that is a key thing that drives me.
Well, and I think it is always important that we learn new skills, isn't it? Because the world is ever evolving and the challenges of the world are ever evolving. And I think as an architect, you're right in the middle of that, aren't you? Because you're then almost having to keep creating new designs to deal with what society needs. I've been fascinated by some of the stuff. This is why I really wanted to talk to you, because I know that one of the biggest challenges most of our clients or employers talk about is how do we get more people back into the workplace post-COVID, where some people have worked at home for the first time ever, but they want to try and really encourage their staff to come back. So what have you been doing and what have you learned in that space as an architect with your management background to encourage, how can we design buildings in a way that encourages people to come back?
The integration between workplace design and organisational culture has just been such an easy connection for me, and it's been something I've been really interested in since long before it was fashionable. But the massive change that's happened within the workplace is mainly to do with the pandemic, of course, as you mentioned. And prior to the pandemic, as an architect, your designs were largely judged on how good they were was your net to gross ratios and how many people did you cram into the space. Whereas now our workplaces, we don't need to cram lots of people in because people are working in different environments. Our workplaces' role have completely changed. They've gone from being filing cabinets to being spaces where you're about supporting people to collaborate and also looking at providing a diverse range of workplaces. It's no use just having a desk that you're sat at. It might be in the morning you're needing to do some collaborative work with the team and talk to all your colleagues and you're in quite a loud mode, but then in the afternoon you need to focus on a report. Those two things need really different environments. And also that, we've got to attract folk back into the office. There's part of me that would quite like to beaver away at home all the time, but especially in construction, which is all about communication really, and for our younger colleagues to be able to learn. And you learn from listening to how other people talk to their clients, how other people communicate, how meetings go, and you learn from having people around you. And if you're sat in your bedroom at home, you're not learning that stuff. So I think that getting us back into the office, but by doing that, by making the office an attractive and a supportive place to be, that's the way to do it, not with a big stick.
And it's interesting because Adam Grant, the organisational psychologist, he's been doing some work on this, and he's been saying that exactly as you've just said, that younger people benefit so much from being in the office because they can learn from the people around them, while maybe more experienced people feel that they're less productive in the office for the very reason. But it's so important because that's how people learn, isn't it? Through almost osmosis. You sit near people and you sort of absorb that. So you were saying that that's now, when you now start designing office spaces, you've got that in mind, that collaboration, but also that those parts of the building where there's quiet work as well.
Yes.
And is there anything else that an employer maybe now listening to this would be saying, right, I want to encourage more people into the office? Is it just those two things, or are there other aspects of things that you could recommend that they would do?
One of the big anomalies that I find particularly interesting is that when we all went home to work from home, we all bought screens and monitors, we bought office chairs and so on. Nobody bought office lighting, and yet we go back into the offices and they're still so really starkly lit. Years ago we used to do a load of work. I used to have a drawing board in my first office, and we used to do a lot of paperwork that needed good light. Now we're all on screens, but we've still got enough light to be able to take someone's appendix out on our desks. So it's about thinking lighting, I think, is really important, especially for encouraging people with more neurodiverse folk back into the office. So, thinking about the lighting is a really key thing. And that, of course, ties in as well with the net zero carbon agenda as well.
Well, as I was listening to you, I was thinking, because as we know, one of the biggest contributors to carbon at the moment is actually the heating and lighting of buildings. So if we're able to reduce the lighting and actually people enjoy that experience more, it feels like a win-win, doesn't it? Yes, and ultimately, as we've said, there are moments, especially not just in construction, but wider, that you do need to collaborate, don't you? And you come into the office to do that because it is better than on Teams, isn't it? Mm-hmm. We all know that deeper, stronger relationships are created when you just meet somebody face to face. I think the word I've heard is burstiness. There's been some work. I know. It's done by one of the American universities, and it's what happens when two people meet, and the energy and the way you bounce off each other when you're together, which is much more challenging when you're on screens and you can't read each other's body language in the same way. And that they've shown that you are more creative when you're together, which is, I guess, what you're doing when you're designing those spaces. You're designing it, I guess, for creativity.
And also so that you have the conversations before the meetings. And you get to know that such and such as dog's poorly, and therefore when they're a bit mardy during the call, it's like, oh, it's all right, the dog's poorly. And so there's all of that conversation. One of the other areas that I find particularly interesting with workplace design is that historically we've thought very much in straight lines. And it's like we line our desks all up in nice straight lines, and we have very straight, paths to go to wherever we're going to in the office. But there's also great value in serendipitous interaction, and about having paths through offices that aren't straight lines, so that there are spaces where naturally you stop and you have a chat with Peter because there's something for you to lean on, and Peter's, oh, hi Peter, and that you're face to face with somebody. So it's thinking more about offices so that those serendipitous interactions can take place, so that people who've been used to the informality and the comfort of home aren't suddenly straitjacketed into a rectilinear, starkly lit environment that we're no longer comfortable with anymore.
So I'm absolutely fascinated by this, because most of our clients ask us not only how can they attract staff, but also how can they retain them. So I'm fascinated that you could design a building in a way that actually not only allows people to collaborate, to brainstorm in a better way, but also allows you to build and deepen and strengthen relationships with your colleagues, so that effectively it's like an anchor, because often your colleagues are a reason you stay. So when you're in the office, to design a building that actually strengthens relationships, I think is quite beautiful, actually.
It's nice, isn't it?
It is.
I think that one of the sort of old adages that's long been around is that people don't leave bad jobs, they leave bad managers, and they leave people where a relationship hasn't gone well or isn't working out for them. But your point about people in the workplace, the purpose of our workplaces has changed completely. Historically, and before the pandemic, our offices were all about organisations portraying their brand and themselves to their clients. And I can remember having lots and lots of meetings in meeting rooms like this, around the table where everybody was sat there talking about construction projects and so on. Since I've been working for Ridge in the last year, I've had one occasion where a client's come into the office. So the purpose of our offices has changed completely. We're now you've heard of the idea of a dark kitchen, where your pizza from Pizza Express comes from not from a Pizza Express branch, but from somewhere else that clients don't go. And now we have the rise of the dark office, where an office is somewhere where clients don't really tend to go, and that therefore places a lot more importance on the office working for and supporting the people that work there and the relationships of the people that are there. So it's like the design focus has gone from, well, we must have big shiny meeting rooms to impress our clients. Clients don't go there anymore, but how are we going to make the environment more productive for us as an organisation, and more collaborative and better for the people that work there, to build those relationships, to keep the people that we want to hang on to.
I love that. I love that you would think about the purpose of a building, like you said, whether it's kind of almost attracting a client is a completely different purpose, as you said, to retaining our staff and making them work so effectively together and getting those teams to bond and being creative. And almost you'd have two offices that have completely different purposes. It's so clever. That's what I think is so valuable about the industry that we work in. When we think about attracting, young people into this industry, when they're making those decisions, often at 15 and 16, I think sometimes we undersell ourselves as an industry as to actually the purpose of what we do. Do you have any thoughts on that?
I think one of the key issues I feel quite passionately about with the construction sector is that unless you have parents who are a cost consultant or an uncle who's a planning consultant or whose aunt's a structural engineer, as a young person, your aspirations are what you can see and what you know about. And so from people on the less salubrious council estate that I grew up on, I was kind of lucky, but other folk, if you don't know what a quantity surveyor is, how can you aspire to be one? Or if you don't know what a planning consultant or an architect is. So one of the things that I think is so important is informing people of what careers are available in construction. And I love an aspiration day. At a primary school, I love an aspiration day. And I introduce children to the idea of being an architect is like playing Minecraft. It is a bit, but to communicate that these jobs are available, because you can't be or aspire to be what you can't see, and if you don't know a job exists, how can you want to be it? And careers in construction are kind of set up for younger middle class folk whose parents might do those jobs already, so they know about them, whereas other folk might not know about them, or young women might think that those jobs aren't for them.
And that is so important, because you think about what we're facing. We've just talked about trying to attract more people into the world of work, which is, don't get me wrong, really important. But we've also got net carbon zero, which is an industry. We're some of the biggest pollutants.
Absolutely.
But also we are the solution too, because we're the ones that are going to solve it via changing boilers, designing buildings in a more sustainable way, and the way that they're maintained in a more sustainable way. So from a purpose point of view, we've got it. But it's almost, how do we make more people feel at home with us as an industry? How do we make more people feel that it's a good industry to join if you're good at STEM, maths, design, when we're competing with other industries, tech, pharma, medicine, who also want perhaps candidates with a similar background? What do you think we could do? Do you think we could do anything differently from a D&I point of view to make anyone, whatever gender, etc., how can we make them feel like, yeah, you'd be very welcome here?
I think that we as an industry are still, everybody pays great lip service to, oh yes, D&I is terribly important to our organisation, but there's an awful lot of talking the talk but not actually walking the walk. And still, till we actually, if we keep doing the same things, we will keep getting the same results. And so with, D&I is still a big issue for construction, and that a lot of people, women or people from other minority groups, feel that it isn't for them, and that it isn't attractive to them, or that they simply have a lack of awareness, as I mentioned, that those careers exist. I think that things are changing, but they're just changing really slowly. We've just had the gender pay gap statistics published, and you can see that lots of construction companies and consultancies are getting there and are making a difference, but there are still organisations who are really struggling to get women into those upper quartile positions, which is basically how you sort your gender pay gap out. It's all very well saying, oh yes, but 50% of our employees are women. But if all of those people are in the lowest pay grades, the lowest quartile of payment, then it doesn't matter that 50% of your team are women. You still have a massive gender pay gap if 90% of your upper quartile are men. And also with D&I, it's very it's a thing that we should be doing because it's, lots of people say, oh, well, it's, very important to brand and very important, and ethically we should do it. Oh, yes. But financially, it makes massive sense. Organisations are absolutely missing a trick. Diversity has been proven time and time again to improve decision making for organisations, and organisations such as the Financial Times, Bain, McKinsey, all of these people have proven time and time again that more diversity within an organisation, especially more diversity in that upper quartile, leads consistently to better performance. So yes, we should be doing it for an ethical point of view, diversity, but also businesses, we're missing a trick if we don't do this, because it's a surefire way. For instance, I think it's recently the FT found that organisations in the upper quartile, in terms of having women in their upper quartile of staff, were 15% more likely, were performing by 15% more than their competitors. And that's a big difference. Yes, we should be doing ethically, but we should also be doing it because it stacks up financially, and that's been proven time and time again.
Absolutely. And what's interesting is when you look at the younger people coming through, which is what's so wonderful because they're so purpose-driven, they're not interested in what you aspire to be, they're interested in what you are. And therefore, when they come on interview, where they do their research on social media before an interview and they can't see evidence, examples of it being a fact that there is diversity, inclusion is promoted, they simply won't take the role, or certainly won't stay, if they perceive there's a gap between what people want to be doing and what employers are actually, what the lived experience actually is. So actually, as you said, it commercially makes sense, it makes sense morally, but also in a global skills shortage, as we said, it helps you to attract and retain staff if they feel that they genuinely work for an organisation where equity is real. So it kind of makes sense. So Kate, thank you so much for coming in and talking to us today. I love that you knew at such a young age that architecture was for you. And I love the passion that you have, that you want to spread the joy, the love and the impact that architecture can have, not only on society, but how a building can change the way you feel, the way you perform, the way you behave. And I think there's a lot of wisdom in there as to what you were saying for employers who maybe haven't thought or reflected that maybe the way their office space is designed they might not have anticipated how much it's affecting their staff.
And their productivity.
Yeah.
That's the thing. That investment of a little bit more capital up front can really drive your productivity.
So I think that's been really useful. Thank you so much for coming in today. And also thank you so much for watching this episode of Building Futures Career Conversations. For previous episodes, you can look on our YouTube channel or our Hayes LinkedIn page.